And you're all fancy with your lower third and everything.
Usually it says Bender Rodriguez, and then I misspell every word in my title. I'll be more professional for you guys.
All right, so it is Thursday, February 19th. We're having a quick design check-in for Backdrop CMS. And Backdrop CMS is a content management system specifically intended for small to medium-sized business. Our target audience short-term are people who are coming from Drupal. Longer-term, we're trying to move into more of a WordPress-style market. And in order to do that, it means we need to have a focus on design, usability, and a bunch of stuff that hasn't historically been super important to Drupal. And so it's kind of important for us to set some guidelines now as to how we're going to do that. So Backdrop 1 is out. We're trying to figure out what we can do to it from here to improve design and usability. So our design tasks currently involve porting the backdropcms.org primary website to Backdrop. It was on Drupal 7 before. We have that underway, nearly finished, I would like to say. And you can currently view it if you want to see it now at new.backdropcms.org. We're probably going to need a design review over there just to make sure that we've gotten everything that was in the original theme and everything that was in the latest designs actually ported into the theme. And then there's probably a few things over there that haven't been designed, stuff we've kind of added onto the site, higgledy-piggledy, that could use look over as well. So I was going to try and get Darius to do that, but Wes, if you want to take a look at that and give us your feedback there, that would also be really great. Then we have the new design from Darius includes mobile navigation, which is super fancy. It has like a little hamburger menu that you can click and expand and appears at the top of the screen, as opposed to what it does now on a mobile phone, which is put all of navigation at the very bottom of the screen. And we have not implemented that. It's because we got those designs while we were still on Drupal 7, and we didn't want to spend a ton of time working on the Drupal 7 theme, knowing we were going to port it to Backdrop. So that's kind of left on our to-do list right now for that theme. But I think we're pretty close in terms of our primary website. And maybe we should add some new tasks for the primary website too, because what we're going to need here in the very near future is adding the ability to post your own project. So we're going to need design on the node add form for projects. I don't know if we're going to have different ones for modules or themes like Drupal.org, but we could. And then we also are going to need design for a project page and design for a project listing, like find modules or find themes or layouts. And I think that's all that's super urgent on our to-do list for the primary website, but it is something that we want to do sooner rather than later. So probably thinking about design for that now would be good. And then, of course, we're going to need implementing the process of getting all those designs done and getting them up on our site. Other things that we're working on, we have the API website, api.backdropcms.org. It's currently running an amazing looking version of the Bartik theme, but it has, it's the wrong branding for us. It's got the wrong fonts, it's got the wrong, colors, all of that stuff. So it would be good to take the theme that we built for the backdropcms.org primary website, throw it onto the API site and say, how close is it? Do we need to specifically design anything for the API site? Like we have kind of a different layout going on with right now we've got the sidebar on the right, which I think is the way Drupal.org site works, as opposed to before on our site it was on the left. I don't know if it was specifically put on the left on purpose or if that was just what we'd done before. If we like it the way it is, does the current theme work with that kind of layout? And just making sure that things like the code, which is most important on the API site, looks good in the new theme. Like, do we need to add more spacing inside code blocks or anything like that? So what I was going to do, now that that's on Backdrop, the API site's on Backdrop, is we could maybe also set up a new for the API site, like new-api.backdropcms.org or something like that. Someplace where we can throw up the theme and let some designers do a review of that as well and see how much work that's going to need in order to get it matching our branding. And then, so let's add a to-do for that as well. Set up dev.
So one thing I'm kind of thinking as you're going through this is, is there a priority between these, like, you know, these disparate tasks, disparate like sections, like, you know, or do we have enough people to like kind of attack each one, you know?
I mean, I think so. Getting the current theme ported to Backdrop is our highest priority because we have a bunch of other stuff that's blocked by that. And so making sure we get a design review of what's already there is more important than adding anything new. And, or sorry, not the API site, the primary site. I think that's what I said.
So the order it's kind of in here is pretty close to the priority.
Yeah, I would say like adding a project page, like we can leave that ugly if we have to. But I would say, you know, I would like that experience to be good for people who are contributors to Backdrop. So if we could get that designed before we build it, that would be ideal. If it doesn't get done in that order of time, we need to build a project listing. We do have the ability to pull in a lot of that information from GitHub, but it would be good if we could kind of smooth that out over for people. So yeah, I'd say this is probably our current order of importance. I would say the API site, because it works so well right now, might actually be lower priority than working on Backdrop the product, which has a release date. So I would say API site probably would come after the product. Our release date for the next version of the software is May 15th, and I would like to see branding in the software by then. And the API site works so well now, even though it doesn't match our branding, I think it's fine to postpone that if we had to.
Okay, cool.
So, speaking of Backdrop the product, we have a new style guide. We had Darius go through. He made us a bunch of initial designs, which we then had some help from Ronnie Norwood actually getting into our style guide. And then Darius looked at the style guide and said, oh, yeah, there's some things that need little tweaks that weren't in the designs. And he started actually writing code directly into the style guide to get it to look like his vision, which I thought was great. And I think he's done with that. We have a check-in scheduled with him. I think it was going to be 2 p.m. today. I need to email him back and confirm that, just to go over stuff that he either was thinking about but wasn't sure about whether it should go in or what have you. Maybe stuff he couldn't get implemented for whatever reason. So I think that's good to go for now. And if there are any changes based on our meeting at 2, I can definitely let you know, Wes, and I'll post something in the issue queue and all of that so that everyone's aware of what's going on. But I would say for now, treat that style guide as final. If you see anything in there that's a little bit off, feel free to adjust. But in general, like, the impression is correct.
Okay. Yeah, I think this style guide, like, actually, he's done a lot. Like, it's kind of done now. It looks like he at least styled everything. But some things I think we might want to take a review of. Some things like the button styles, for example. Like, he's got like a primary button and a secondary button, but it's crazy because the primary button's blue, but the secondary button when you hover over it is green, and so it needs a little bit of attention. The progress bar has also got a little too much bling maybe going on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the throbber is a little broken right now, which I find happens a lot when I'm theming Drupal 7 if I make a field bigger.
We fixed it in Backdrop.
Yeah.
In the style guide it doesn't have the CSS that's in Backdrop because it's not running off the style guide module, but we did fix it in Backdrop.
Gotcha. I did goof around and make a couple GIF ideas that GIF or GIF or whatever you want to say for what that could be. Like, I personally don't like that little clock-looking guy because it feels like, oh, I'm waiting, and like the time and clock kind of metaphor I think is kind of negative, but being a dork about it. I gotta let my dog in real quick. They're yelling at me. I'll be right back.
Okay.
So one thing that might be good is before we have a check-in with Darius today, if you could put all these thoughts, that ones you just had, for example, into a document that we can work through, so that we can address whatever feedback you have with Darius today, so that we get unblocked on implementing stuff.
Yeah, could we just put it? Is it a bad idea? Is it a bad idea to just put it in this agenda so that we still have one weekly document, or should we make a new one?
You mean for just feedback?
Yeah, just for feedback.
Can we put it in like an issue in because the Google Docs get lost?
That would be better. You're right.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
On the style guide project.
Okay. That sounds on the style guide project.
You know how there's a GitHub project for the style guide?
And backdrop ops. Okay. Yeah. You're right. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. And then that way we can refer to it later, and we won't be like, where's the Google Doc? It's a Google thing. Google Docs are like where things go to die. Okay, you can't search Google Docs with the internet, with the Google search.
You can't really search GitHub with the internet either.
That's not true. I often will Google, and as long as the thing that you're looking for has exactly the words you're searching for, you can usually find it.
Okay, all right.
And you start with like GitHub backdrop style guide, and then you type whatever in there searching for. Okay. So in terms of the style guide, we think it's done. It needs some feedback. We have a meeting with Darius today to review that. Then we need to figure out, then this is the hard part, how to get the changes that are in the style guide into the product. And the hard part is that Backdrop 1 has shipped, so we don't have complete flexibility over changing everything. In particular, markup that comes out of system module and theme.inc needs to change as little as possible. Because we do have people who might already be providing themes to override it, we don't want to break those themes. So ideally, we would be able to do things like take changes to the status messages and put them directly into the status messages that come out of core. However, if it requires like adding a new span tag or a div tag, or spans might be okay, we'll have to look at what the changes are. But something that's going to break a theme, that change is going to have to go into 7 instead, so that when people, their custom themes won't show that change, but the administrative interface will still show the correct branding for Backdrop. So what might be good is to go through the style guide, and I don't know what your procedure is for this, Wes. When I do a theme, I usually just kind of do one piece at a time, and then if I forget something, I just go back and do it again. So I'm kind of all over the place. I don't necessarily have like a super rigid procedure. I'm like, style this and that and this, and oh, I missed this over here, and this is different. And then eventually you go back to the designer and they tell you all the other stuff you missed. But in this case, what we might need to do is kind of break them out and say, like, status messages, this is one task, and then like breadcrumbs, this is one task, tabs, this is one task, and figure out for each item where those changes need to happen. And that's going to require a code review, and not necessarily code that's in the style guide, but code that you'd want in the real thing. Because the style guide code is not exactly, where it's not the right starting point, and it might not be the right ending point either. So doing that kind of a methodical review, and then what I was thinking we could do in order to divide work a little bit more easily is create kind of 2 meta issues. One for changes that go into core or system module and theme.inc and all of that, and one that are changes directly to the 7 theme. And that might be a way that we can, if we created one pull request for each of those, you could apply the first pull request and say, does it break any contrib themes? Like if you just apply the core one, we could see what kind of branding changes we're getting just from changing the innards of core. Or the other one, if you can apply just the pull request for 7, then you can say, like, does the 7 theme change in the way that we want? Does it work with the way the core is now? And we can kind of separate those 2 things. That does make it really hard if you have, like, GitHub's working process makes it hard to collaborate on any one pull request. Pull requests very specifically belong to one person, and in order for someone to work on someone else's pull request, you have to, like, fork it. It's kind of a pain. So I thought that it might be good if we have only 2 people working on this, if it's you and Ronnie, that would be a good workflow, because there would be a good way to divide that. But if it ends up being like, other people want to contribute and we have more working on it, we might need to break it up into more than 2 pull requests and have, like, okay, here are the 5 things we're putting into 7, everybody grab one. And that's the way Drupal 8 did it. They did it one element at a time. And the reason I didn't want to do that initially is because it seems like a lot of work, like, especially the way that I do a theme where I just do everything all at once. But I'll let you decide, Wes, what's going to work best for you, if you would rather do them one element at a time, or if you would rather do them a theme at a time or a system at a time, or however.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe like we usually identify components, right? So like, it might be one component is all of these basic body copy kind of styles like strike through small. So like all that might be one component so that they're not overly small, but I don't want it to be overly big. And like status message is a pretty nice little, and just so maybe a task is just to go through and identify what the components are, and then we can start breaking them down and thinking about, okay, this one should be done in the theme, and this one should be done in system and whatever.
Okay. Yeah, I think that sounds good. And then if you want to start that, and the way that I've been doing this too, in the GitHub issue queue, you can create, and I think I did this in the top of the implementation issue, you can create little like check boxes. Feel free to group those however you want. I think you should even have permission, let us know if you don't, to edit the top issue, right? Which is basically like edit anyone's comments, so be careful with that. But feel free to go ahead and edit those lists and rearrange those checkboxes however you need. And if you want to start making that list, and if the checkboxes I already have there wrong, that's fine, just redo them. But then that way we can kind of get an idea of what's going on. And then if Ronnie comes and says, oh, I need, I've got a couple of hours today, what should I work on? You can point him at that list and say, I'm working on the top section, but take anything else. Or add a comment at the bottom saying we're working on the top section, so if you're not there, he knows that. But that might be a good way to kind of help divide work amongst a bunch of different people.
Sure. Cool.
That would be wonderful. All right. So, yeah, those are the two tricky things with that. And I think all of the other things that we're working on that are design related and Backdrop the product have issues that are tagged with audience design. So if we have anyone who has 5 minutes and they want to contribute their design intellect, but maybe not code, if you click that link, there's a link in the agenda today, or you can just search for anything that's tagged with audience design. You can find some issues that need designer feedback and some issues that actually need designs if you want to mock up designs. So anyone who has just a little bit of time and they're watching this video and wants to contribute in some way, we are trying to make it easy to identify tasks specifically for designers in the issue queue too. Other people who have more time, more than 5 minutes, and they want to contribute to design for Backdrop, what we really need, what I would love for us to be able to do, is include a front-end theme that's not Bartik in core. And our path to doing that is having somebody either port a theme from Drupal 7 or create a new theme specifically for Backdrop that supports all the layouts in core, that looks great, that is fairly design agnostic in that it's versatile, which is hard, I know, for designers, but something that we can put in core that is not Bartik. And so if we can get a contributed theme and then someone will post in the issue queue, move this theme into core, we can do a really thorough review of the code in that contributed theme or the style or whatever it is and say, yes, we want this in core, we love the way it works, great code, good job, and move it in. But in order to do that, we want to have not just one theme to look at in core, we want to have a couple to compare. And right now we do have one on our radar. There's a theme called Radix, which is based on a Panoply theme in Drupal, which is fantastic. And I think it's probably the first theme we had for Backdrop, which is also really great, which means it's going to have a nice long lifetime and a lot of people using it. But I would love to get more themes for us to be able to choose from to put into core. So designers coming into Backdrop who want to contribute, make a theme, design a theme. If you can pair up with someone who writes code, that's even better. If you write the code yourself, that's fabulous. But get us some themes in contrib so that we have some options for moving those into core. Okay, so I think we talked about the Backdrop API website already, but I've rearranged it in the agenda by order of importance, so here it is again. Okay, other things we're working on in the product, we have, just like the Backdrop design tagged issues, we also have a ton of user experience improvements. And this is something that, again, has been a struggle for Drupal just because every developer ends up doing interfaces in their own way. We have a bunch of issues in the Backdrop queue that aren't tagged like the design issues are, but they start with square brackets and the letters UX inside of them. And so anytime you're using Backdrop and you get confused by something, go ahead and create an issue and tag, put in the title square bracket UX, and then that'll indicate to us that this is a user experience problem. We can think about how to solve the problem. Most of these user experience issues are things like change the label on a button or add some description text, but there are some that are completely redesign the whatever page. For example, like that layout drag and drop interface, and those are going to need design tests as well. So that's why it's included in this meeting, especially people who have interface design experience as opposed to like make it look pretty design experience. That's something that the Drupal community historically has been really short on, and we would love to get more experts in that area for Backdrop, especially if we are trying to move into the WordPress market where user experience is super important for us being able to compete and actually get those people to like using our product as well. So we have a handful of those. As they come up, I try and take a look at them. We've got user experience experts who are taking a look at them, weighing in, giving feedback and stuff, so definitely focusing on those is great. Speaking of user experience, we also have this great document on Backdrop's human interface guidelines that was inspired by a similar document that Apple has about how all of its software should be to interact with, and hardware too, I suppose, in Apple's case. And I would like to have the same kind of thing for us, where if we can have some documentation on when people should use drop buttons, when people should use vertical tabs, I think it'll be really easy for module developers to follow those instructions. Whereas right now we have, a bunch of different opinions about how those should be used and when. Like we love drop buttons, so we put them all over the place in Backdrop Core. And just this week, there's a discussion that started about, what should be in a drop button? Should an external link be in a drop button? There isn't any guidelines for us in core about whether you should open a drop button and go off site. Like, it seems like an internal thing, and so that might be a little weird. And it's like, okay, well, if we're not going to put these links in a drop button, maybe we should use an icon. We don't have any rules about when you should use an icon. It would be great to have those documented. And then, of course, there's the long-running vertical tabs debate. There's a module for Drupal 7 called module filter module, which I personally hated because it had a use of vertical tabs, which I felt like was not what vertical tabs were intended for. But there wasn't any documentation anywhere about what vertical tabs were intended for, and so module developers are like, vertical tabs are a great tool, we'll use them anywhere, like the interface is cluttered. And it's like, okay, I understand why there was an attempt to do that, but I would love for someone to tell me when to use these things so that you could point to that and say, this is a good case for that, or this is not a good case for that. So we have that for Backdrop, this human interface guidelines document. It is not done. And the guy who started it, I think, is really busy these days, and he's not working on it actively. And I would love for someone who's super interested in the way that people interact with computers to pick this up. So if anyone has a couple minutes of spare time, they want to take a study of Backdrop, they want to take a stab at working on this document, it is in GitHub. You can fork it. You can write, I think it's using Jekyll, so you can write in Markdown syntax. You don't need to be a coder, just to kind of stub out pages and get us some, direction closer to having this done. And I don't think this is, this isn't super urgent. Obviously, we've got a lot of code that needs to be written, but I think it's going to be important for us long-term to have resources like this. So I would love if we could get it done by Backdrop 2 so that when we start making decisions about what should be changed between Backdrop 1 and Backdrop 2, we have it to refer to. Backdrop 1 is obviously very similar to Drupal, so we've got all of their old habits baked into our software. But getting something figured out for us, I think, would be great moving forward. So we've got some time, but it also, I think, is going to need some careful thought. So getting going on that is also going to be important for us. And then we also have, along that same line, a set of Backdrop brand guidelines. And I think I was tempted to remove this from the agenda this week because we talk about it every week, and it's, I think, been decided that we are close enough to done with it that we don't necessarily need to work on it anymore. But we have a press kit page on our website which gives people instructions on how they should be referring to Backdrop. Like, it's Backdrop CMS, but you can call it Backdrop unless that's confusing, and then you should call it Backdrop CMS. And we've got our logos on there and things for people to download, like the cute little dragon. But what we don't have anywhere is posted like the font that you should use when you're building like the Backdrop website, or the color palette that you should use. And I don't know if we have a good home for these things. Like, is this information that should be on Backdrop's website, or in a GitHub issue queue, or I don't know, in a Dropbox for Backdrop? Like, where do we put these resources, and is there a good place to share them? And I know we talked about it 2 weeks ago, and I don't actually remember what we decided about where those should go. But I don't think we need any work on the style guide necessarily. I think we know what we're dealing with in terms of, the style guide for the product is basically done. It just needs some feedback. The style guide for backdropcms.org, the website, is basically done because we have a website. But I have a feeling that going forward, we're going to have new things designed, and we're going to need to have a place to point designers and say, this is our style guide, let's make a modules page, a page to find modules, and refer to this as your, document. And maybe all we need is another document like the human interface guidelines one, like another repo under backdrop ops that has, 4 pages in it, something very basic that's like, here's our font, here's our color palette. That might be sufficient.
As an outsider, I just had a couple thoughts.
Sure.
Semi-outsider. So I usually go to, I try to dig in like about pages a lot of times and see if there's something in there about, press kit sometimes has it or whatever. But looking at your site, I was looking at the handbook, and if design and user experience is something that you're going to want more involvement in down the road, you have a developer guide, maybe there's a designer or design UX guide, and it could have a lot of stuff like that and like ways to get involved, and because you have contributing code for developer guide.
Okay.
Seems like that might work.
Yeah, and then that's also good too because if we want to set out from the beginning, this is a friendly place for designers. Having a developer guide and not a designer guide kind of sets the wrong tone there. So I like that idea. So the downside to having all of the stuff on our primary website is that it's not as open as like having it in a GitHub repository like the human interface guidelines doc. So what I would like to do, if possible, is to create those pages on the primary website that say like the most basic things. When designing for Backdrop, refer to these resources, and then have those resources be in GitHub so that we can have faster iteration and more collaboration and stuff. But I do think that having that right on the primary website, right where everyone can find it, is going to be super beneficial. Okay. I love it. And then things like the color palette, we can throw that up like on the website for people to see with the hex codes and everything, and I think that's also a good place rather than having like a file stashed in Dropbox. You can actually see it like on the webpage. I think it's going to be great too. Okay, so I'm going to make a to-do here then. Add to handbook. All right, and then I guess the next question is, we have this meeting once every 2 weeks, fortnightly, and this is kind of what we talk about every 2 weeks. Is there anything that we need to add to this agenda that we should be thinking about that we're not thinking about related to design tasks? We used to have stuff on here that was like, designing stickers and T-shirts and hoodies, and all of that became a non-priority, and so I removed it from the agenda. Just so we weren't talking about it again over and over, going, if anyone wants to make us stickers, we have a dragon. I think we even had a couple people who were interested in that and took the dragon and ran, and I don't know if they're working on it or not, but anyway, not as big a priority, so I took it off. But if there's anything else related to the product or related to the environment we're trying to create for designers, I would love feedback on that. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts. No. Okay. Well, if they come up in the future, we can add.
Not yet, anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then we also have at the end of every meeting kind of an open discussion time where if there's anything that we, anyone who's joined the meeting wanted to talk about, we could talk about that. I know, Wes, you're primarily here for style guide stuff, and we've talked about that in the style guide section of the agenda. But I don't know if you have any other questions about like how we work or anything like that that is better discussed face to face.
Yeah, I've mostly just I can talk a little bit how I've been trying to figure out things. So right now it's kind of like I feel like I'm looking at something that's like has there's a lot going on, but I'm not quite sure. I don't want to like be the guy that pulls a Jenga block out that like messes things up. Not like you can. I can put up like a pull request. You could be like, that's not what we want. It's probably the worst that would happen. But it's been just been more like I haven't really contributed in open source before, and it's like, how do I add some value? How do I like get in there and like, okay, this needs to be done. I can do it. So I feel like now I have a better grasp on like, okay, I can chunk out some tasks. We're just trying to make. So it sounds like we're just trying to take the style guide, which is fairly static, inspecting the styles and making sure they get into the right place in the product. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of that at this point of chunking stuff out and just having whoever work on it. So yeah, I mean, right now I feel like I'd be most helpful.
And we seem to have a lot of doers and not a lot of organizers, just based on the amount of time that people can commit to the project. Like if you only have an hour, you're not going to start like organizing how people should be doing stuff. You're just going to do whatever you can do in that hour. And so I think what would be most beneficial for us is if you could help us kind of organize, like how are we do this thing. And as soon as there's a list of tasks, you'll see people just come out from the woodwork and do them, which is amazing. Like we put things in the issue queue and you turn around and they're fixed. And it's like, I love this community. They're so great. If we can have a list of tasks. And I think the reason that the style guide hasn't gone faster than it is because we don't have that plan. And I know that it's like, hey, you're new, make a plan. That's like a hard thing.
Right, yeah. I didn't want to like come in and make a plan and be like, that's not how we want to approach this. But yeah, I'm totally
I think
up for doing that.
Come up with is better than our non-plan right now. And if there's something that we think that we can, change and do better, we'll say so. And if not, we should
totally.
try it. So.
Totally. Yeah. Just want to make sure I'm like on a similar page, and then we can course correct as we kind of move along. So cool.
Yeah. I think for starters, what we should probably do is make a meta issue. We usually have a like general conceptual issue of the big large task, and then we put like checkboxes, like Jen was saying, and
I was thinking
indicate the project progress, and then cross-link all of the sub-issues as you start making the individual components and things.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was thinking like a Jira epic, and then you have like the tasks in the epic, and then you can link off to them, and GitHub will probably update it and be like, this one's done, and cross off the link, or
Yep. So, GitHub's issue queue is a lot worse than Jira, but you can do something kind of similar. Yeah.
Cool. I'll give it a shot and see how it goes.
Awesome. That would be great.
So we do have the meta issue already, and
we do.
This is issue number 201.
Okay.
I'll paste it here into the chat. But this is a thing to think too. Sometimes when I look at an issue that's this long, I find it a little bit daunting, and it might be better for you, Wes, to just create your own meta issue, and at some point, like ping me or Nate or in the Backjob IRC channel or however you want to do it and say, hey, I created this meta issue. We'll take a look at it, and if yours is a good plan, we'll just close this old one and point it at the new one.
Yeah, this old one really kind of went off the rails for a while. So I think that would be good to just say, because this one mostly was around discussing like how to implement on the style guide, but now the style guide is kind of it's done, thanks to Darius. So, maybe have a different one for.
Yep, and that'll let me,
implementation.
That'll let me do some trial and error with making an epic and chunking things out. So.
Sure.
Okay. Cool. I also sent you, Russ. I don't think you actually were in the group yet for maintaining issues. So I sent you an invite via email, and that'll let you edit and label and assign and do all of that stuff on GitHub.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I think that's it for our meeting today. But we do tend to meet every other Thursday at 12 o'clock. So if anyone who's watching right now would like to join in person, you're welcome to do that. Also, if anyone's watching later wants to join, that's fine. If you can't make a noon Pacific time Thursday meeting, you can always join us in IRC. You can check us out in the GitHub. You can tweet at backdropcms.org. There's lots of people around doing work all the time, so you don't have to be part of this hangout to be part of the design team for Backdrop. We love designers. We don't have as many, so definitely anything we can do to help make that environment more inviting. We're also open to hearing about that. But thanks for joining us. We're excited to have you on board, and we will see you in the issue queue.
Cool.
All right. Thanks. Bye, guys.
Talk to you later.
Bye.